Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm a little bit later than normal this morning. My internet connectivity here has been pretty rough, but I'm in the northern plains of the United States, and to be honest with you, to see low temperatures that barely touched freezing last night is pretty mild for this point in December. In fact, there's quite a bit of mild air that's flooding the central part of the United States here in the near term. We still have some cold conditions down here in parts of the southeast under a larger area of high pressure. Clear skies, light winds, just the temperatures bottomed out again, so we had a frost event that got pretty far into the southeast. We're going to be keeping an eye on a frost risk here later this week into the weekend in parts of California's Central Valley. But as it stands, we've got quite a bit of mild air expected for the midsection of the United States today, with temperatures by the afternoon, way up here in the 60s and 70s in parts of the plains. Now, for reference, that's about 30 degrees warmer than the climatological normal. And we still have an issue right now, kind of across the whole of the northern hemisphere, of where the coldest air is planted, and it's firmly into Russia and Siberia, and it might be not until the very end of this month, maybe the beginning of January, before we start to flip that pattern around, a bit more substantially. So here's that high pressure cell that set over the southeast, keeping things colder last night and drier, but colder, clear skies, and this is the pump kind of on the back side of it, bringing in more mild air. We are going to watch this low that's spinning through parts of the Canadian prairie and its potential to drop temperatures behind it, and also what it might do in terms of bringing some snow into the northern plains later this week. But you still see the decently strong onshore flow throughout the day today here in the Pacific Northwest, which has just been bombarded with precipitation. Even in the last 3 days, we've added in some parts of Oregon and Washington an additional 6 to 8 inches, some places even more than that, in terms of precipitation, bringing these 7-day totals, these 10-day totals in some of this area, well up over 10 to 15 inches of rainfall. And you've probably seen in the news a lot of the flooding that's gone on here and some of the rescues that have been made and some of the rivers that are at new all-time record flood stage. Meanwhile, much of the rest of the country for the last few days has been relatively benign. Some light snow showers plus some light rain moving through parts of the Midwest. We're going to watch for that again today in parts of New England. But I just want to show you what's going on in the Northwest. So yesterday's satellite animation, this right here is just what's left of that large frontal boundary that's tucked up with that low in the Gulf of Alaska. Well, we had two other short waves, one here and here, that were kind of moving toward the northwest. And as the sun set last night, we look at the infrared imagery. The first one went right toward the Puget Sound. The second one here is moving into early this morning Northern California and Oregon, delivering its next round of precipitation. So what do we have left? Well, over the next 7 days, as you can see here, there's still another 1 to 4 inches of rainfall coming in from Northern California, coastal Oregon, and Washington. We're going to add up more snow in the Cascades, also in the Rockies here. We'll take a look at that as well. The models have picked up on better chances for snow coming out of Montana, southern Canadian prairie, northern plains, really mostly here in North Dakota. But I think the trend we've watched is where the heaviest rainfall is going to be. This has continued to press east with each new model run. And there is another system about a week from now we're going to keep an eye on down in the southwestern, southern part of the United States. But that's your newest update from the WPC on the next 7 days of total precip. Okay, we do have the severe thunderstorm risk tomorrow night, and then again on Saturday down here in the southern plains, getting into the lower Mississippi River Valley. And this Delta region has been, it's been a difficult area to forecast severe storms for lately. Some of the systems that have rolled through, the risk looks like it's there, and then the day of the event, we just kind of wash everything out. So I think a lot of us, including the Storm Prediction Center, are watching this carefully, knowing that the risk is there. But this whole system has changed quite a bit in its kind of dynamic structure lately. So let's get up to that point in the forecast. We're going to use the high-res NAM to play through the day today into this afternoon and this evening. So here's that low that's curling up. You can see the snow trailing it here, some coming into western North Dakota by tonight. So we're going to push that very mild air out quickly in this part of the country. Still snow coming into parts of the Rocky Mountains and the Cascades here. Remember, they had about 40 to 50 inches of snow in parts of the Cascades and then flooded it with rains with some mild air. That's really the wrong recipe for the mountains there. But this is getting into about 5 a.m. Friday morning, playing through mid-morning on Friday. And so you can see how quickly we turn this air back over to what we would call normal temperatures for this time of year. So enjoy it today, because we've got some much colder air coming in late in the day on Friday, with the chance of some snow right in through this area. Now remember, we're keeping an eye out on Friday night for parts of the south, this side of the Mississippi, for the risk of strong storms. The NAM is not initiating those. You just don't see it there. But as we play through Friday and work our way into Saturday, is a pretty tight little shortwave that now sneaks out of the broader trough and goes right across, here where Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin meet. And that one's going to be interesting to watch because it might curl up enough cold air to deliver a pretty decent shot at snow right into this area. But what you have on the backside is just still left over from the previous system, the one that moved through parts of southern Canada. And we'll watch out on Saturday night for the risk of the stronger storms to redevelop in this area, but it'll all be about the timing of that front. So I kind of wanted to spend a little time in the high-res NAM. I think it's got a pretty good handle on where this is going here. But I want to show you the problem in this pattern. Well, what I would call the problem. You see, we're looking at vorticity. And remember, when we think about vorticity, what we talk about here is getting areas of positive vorticity, shown in the deeper shades here, to move over or evect to regions of lower vorticity or no vorticity or positive vorticity. Okay, so we want to see this what you've got right in through here, kind of sneak into these areas and change. Okay, but the best way to get a low to rapidly deepen is to get a ball of vorticity. That tells me there's a lot of curves in the flow, and that's what tends to rapidly intensify a low. So by Saturday, that low that's coming right over Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa, that's the shortwave I'm talking about. Here's the broader wave though. And the problem with this pattern is that we don't have this like nice, tight, deep ball of vorticity at the base of it. And you say, well, why? Remember what I told you yesterday? The flow was coming screaming in like this and screaming out like that, but it was slow here. If it could get really going fast in the base of this trough, then we'd get this tight circulation, and we would be talking about a substantial severe weather risk in the south. But what it is it's speed shear. So you've got slower winds here, really fast winds there, and so it just curls up this little ribbon of vorticity, but you don't get deep concentrated low pressure development out of that. So we have to wait. And what are we waiting for? We're waiting for Monday, I don't know, late in the weekend, early next week, when this tries to do something over the East Coast. This is kind of how we diagnose the chances of these lows getting deeper and deeper. We're looking at vorticity here, the advection of it. Then what we're watching after that, this would be next Wednesday into next Thursday, is the models are toying with tossing some sort of cutoff low from California over into this section of the Four Corners States, Southern Plains. And that's what I'm saying. Watch out about a week to 7, 8, 9 days from now for something over here in this part of the country. Okay, let's now go to our multi-model analysis to kind of pick up on how all of this pans out. We're going to pick this up, how about Friday evening, right about here. So we got in both models, the snow moving through North Dakota. That's pretty good, agreement here. We're going to watch on Friday night, possibility of some strong to severe storms down south. And then we're going to watch the first low curl up over the Hudson Bay. And then the second little shortwave go right over Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin. That's in both models. And we could possibly get some thunderstorms pretty far north into the Midwest. But now what do you see? I mean, this is now Saturday. If you watched me all week, you know that we were talking about big snows in Iowa, or maybe Illinois, or Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin. And here we are now midday Saturday, and we've tossed a dry slot into that area. And now the rain is farther to the east. And the system doesn't really start to curl up until it gets here Sunday night across the east. Now, there could be some locally very heavy rain that moves out ahead of this as the system gets its act together here. But will it even curl up with the hopes of delivering some snow into New England? Both models have that, but it's not like it's the deep ball of vorticity I want to really crank a large low in this area. By the way, just to point this out, there is another system coming into the northwest. Let's back it up here. This is Saturday morning, Saturday midday, getting into Sunday. So watch in the northwest for the next system to arrive this weekend as well. Let's just go ahead and play this out into early next week. Not a whole lot going on. One of the big reasons for that, remember, northwest flow is convergent. So what we'll watch is by next Wednesday into Thursday, both models are toying with that shortwave coming out right into this area, and we'll just see if that actually develops some sort of a low as we work our way out to about day 10 in the forecast. Okay, how about some maps to kind of explain the pattern? Here is the next 7 days according to the ECMWF. So total precipitation next 7 days. Take a close look at it. And here's the GFS. And you can see both models are in better alignment than they were earlier in the week. I'm happy with the alignment we've got here. But I want to point out some of the differences in the snow. So how about a 7-day snowfall forecast looking kind of almost at all of North America here? Then this would be the GFS, so the European model to the GFS. Now I want to zoom in a bit on a couple of regions with the European model just to show you that that second pulse coming in this weekend is one that might pack up more snow in the Cascades, Northern Rockies here. So we'll watch out for that. But this is your 7-day outlook for total snow across the West. The numbers are in inches here. If we look at the Midwest, same thing, it's just gone. I mean, we got this snow coming in here, so good chance 3 to 5 inches of snow on the back side of that low curling through southern Canada at the end of this week. But, it's no longer here. So some folks are probably pretty happy about that, but I know some of you want some snowfall, and we've kind of pulled that out of the forecast as this whole system's just trended farther to the east. And speaking of the east, let's go ahead and play this out to kind of get an idea here. In fact, I better reload this. There we go. Hopefully my internet will catch up. Good. We're going to play this out. There's the light snow we're expecting in the near term. And then here is the latest snowfall for early next week. So the timing on this is Sunday afternoon, getting into Sunday evening, overnight hours going into Monday morning, playing through the middle of the day on Monday to Wednesday, or to Tuesday. And you can see we've still got another maybe 4 to 8 inch snowfall event here. The models have trended less over the last few runs here. Okay, who's dry in all of this? I continue to go back to these probability maps. I think they're very instructive here. And using the ensemble, we look at the next 10 days, and this is the chance at staying less than a half inch. So there's a big section of the Southwest, a big section of the Canadian Prairie, much of the Northern Plains, getting into the upper Midwest, it stays drier. And this has been the area that's gone through that's trended drier, this whole region in through here, which we've been watching very carefully for, of course, soil moisture recovery, and also what's going on with the Mississippi River, which we'll provide an update again tomorrow. Okay, problem by day 10. Well, our Gulf of Alaska trough tries to move closer, but there's still a whole lot of flow coming over the top like this. And because of that, there's just risk of drier, when we get past this weekend system. We then see, though, that the models going out there at about the 18th, 19th, and 20th are hinting at some sort of central U.S. trough event. I'd like it. I mean, we'd need to get another system rolling through here. But to make this thing more of a player, it's hard to do that when you've got low pressure in Alaska and higher pressure east. In other words, what we want is high pressure east, high pressure in Alaska, amplify the pattern, get the right curve in there, and it will really take off. So you're going to see that the week 2 forecasts overall, they're starting to show something down here. We talked about that yesterday, but convergent flow for most of it across the top means we shut things down for the west. Some in the northwest desperately need a break from this, and we get a bit drier here in and throughout the Mississippi, Ohio, Missouri Basin, Great Lakes Basin in the week 2 forecast. All 3 models picking up on that. Okay, back to the temperature discussion. Just want to point out again this idea of where all of this very cold air is, and we just need to pay close attention to how this moves. Right now it's been moving farther and farther to the east, and what we need to pay attention to is how this eventually affects the Pacific jet stream. That'll be our first change we get, and then where this cold air eventually kind of bobs around on the northern hemisphere. I'll come back to that in each video for the next several weeks. But as it stands, even though we do have frost extending pretty far to the south, like this morning we did, it's down into Texas, and there's that Central Valley frost, we don't have a connection to really cold air across North America. It's just not there. So here's Thursday's highs. There we get the switch over on Friday, but much of that mild air moves east on Friday. A lot of colder air in the mountains here and in the southwestern United States, but it's not long duration. By Sunday, getting into Monday, and Tuesday, just more mild air kind of floods much of North America here. We don't have the big blocking ridges over Alaska and Greenland to help transport Arctic air back to the whole of the central United States. So as I just play it out here, it's the same old story. The next 5 days looks like this, and we just play this out to day 5 through 10, and then day 10 through 15. And I'll be honest with you, this is very El Nino looking for December. More mild north, near normal to cooler than average to the south. That's typically what we get. Okay, what am I watching? Well, the polar vortex is displaced. You can see that it is in the stratosphere, anchored more over, this part of the Arctic. It's closer to Europe. It's closer to Russia. There's ridging here. We talked about this yesterday. This might look like this for another 10, 15 plus days. But at some point, it will start to wobble and meander and shift around, and that's when things are going to start to take off. Now, when is that? Well, that's a difficult kind of question to answer, because even as far out as I look in the ensemble models, getting out there to December 21st as an example, we keep troughs here. Even though the Atlantic is trying to build some ridging, that's not the right setup just to deliver really cold air anywhere across North America. So we're going to likely stay sustained on the mild side of average for North America for a while because of this. Now, the MJO progression, which, remember, if you want to just generically blandly think about this, we would call 3, 4, 5, and 6 to be the more mild side of the MJO progression for North America, with 7, 8, 1, 2 being the colder side. We've kind of seen the model slow things down a bit here in this transition spot, which means we're not making this dive rapidly in the tropics to give us a connection to get cold air. But if we get the MJ over here and we get ridging in Alaska and Greenland at the same time, the cold air is going to leave Russia and it will show up. It'll show up in a big way. But we may be waiting several more weeks for that to happen. I'm really thinking it might be the end of December or into January before we start to get something like that occurring, if at that point. Kind of just following that same narrative, this back half loaded winter is what I think we're going to be seeing for much of the U.S. Okay, I want to give some attention here to South America, and I was working on a plot yesterday on the flight. I pulled off data from the CPC going back to 1979, and I had it rank just the last 30 days. Now, I got to work on this map. I realize it's ugly. My color bar, none of you are going to like it, but I tried to just rank this year to the previous year. So what you've got here is, the ranking. So when you're looking through this area, this is like a top 5 driest since 1979, with a few places being the driest. And this hit its Mato Grosso, Goiás, Minas Gerais, parts of Mato Grosso do Sul. Whereas you come down into southern Brazil, and we're way up here in this, a top 5, top 8 wettest in pockets of southern Brazil. We've seen better rains along the Paraná River, better rains in Buenos Aires. Now, I point this out just to make a case here. We probably saw about half of normal rainfall in these key areas. Now, half of normal rainfall isn't crisis mode yet for a big area, because half of normal rainfall still results in, an inch and a half of rainfall a week in some of this area. So I keep pointing out we have rain in here. It is just, dangerously low and on the cusp of being a major issue. I wanted to also kind of summarize everything into one picture, because I think it's difficult when I kind of go back and forth on things to kind of get this idea. So I made this slide this morning, and right now what I'm seeing is that if you look at the European ensemble for the next 15 days and compare it to the GFS, I see a few things. Now remember, you have to make sure you remember where the Amazon is. Okay, it's up here. So when I look at the European model, I see that this area I've outlined has been trending drier, okay? And I would call that about 30% of Brazil's total growing area. Now, if you included Mato Grosso, southern Goiás, and Mato Grosso do Sul into this, then we'd be talking about, 70% of the growing area. But the European model has been wetter here, closer to average. It still has the flooding coming out of Paraguay into southern Brazil, and it also has really beefed up the precip forecast for Argentina. Now, if we come over to the GFS forecast, kind of the same time period, it has a much more expansive area of drier conditions. I'm calling this about 50%. Now, I'm basing that, when you come back and look at that, on these graphics down here for corn and soybeans. These are just from the USDA. That's where I'm kind of adding up these numbers and trying to make a case for this. But similarly to what the European model is doing, it's wetter here and wetter into Argentina, which is very important for Argentinian agriculture. I will say this, the European model has been biased too wet, but I'll also say the GFS has been biased too dry. The reality lives somewhere between these two models, and it's been difficult to kind of, I think, pick that out and understand what the true issue is. So what I'm thinking here is that there are pockets in this central west region. There's pockets in this north central region that have been, extremely hot. They had another round of heat just lately, and also so dry that the crops have either gone in very, very late, 3 to 6 weeks late, or they've been replanted, or some of them have been burned up and they've switched over to full season corn or cotton. I am not the expert to tell you on what that is, though. That's just anecdotal evidence I hear from folks down here. So we need to combine this with boots on the ground information. So this is purely anecdote, what I just shared with you there. But the models, that I can be a bit more of an expert on, showing you overall. I also included on the left the last 1 month drought severity, and I put this on here to kind of match up with the figure I made from the CPC data. I'm also going to do this with the ERA 5 data as well to kind of make a better case of it. But I'm working on some new code that I hope you'll all like when I start to release it here very soon. Okay, we still have this problem though, and that is the European model wants to bring, look at this. This is a 7-day sliding window at the end of December. It really wants to return a lot of moisture here. It was a big swing and a whiff back in November. It tried to do some of this in November and it did not verify. So we have big questions. Is this actually going to go through? And I'll make the same statement I made yesterday. If it does, and the model is finally picking up on a reasonable signal, which I think is mostly being driven by the MJO, it's being hampered a bit by what we call the positive phase of the Atlantic meridional mode. But if it does deliver rain here, this changes the entire outlook for South America. So I'm just going to make my case here that from today through about the 20th of December, the forecast evolution in this area is going to be absolutely critical to watch here overall. Okay, last couple things to point out. I want to come back to the long-range forecast again. I want to just make a case here for that idea of a back half-weighted winter. December's pattern, as currently forecast by the European model, has got the stuff I keep complaining about, and that's the troughs over Alaska. You see, if we lock up the cold air here, and well, simply put, it's very difficult to let it invade the United States. You've got to ridge out Alaska and Greenland at the same time. So that's why most of December, part of the reason why most of December doesn't look, cold. But if you flip this one forward, you start to see something like this in the model. There's some ridging here. And even though there's still kind of a semi-permanent low over the Canadian archipelago, there's some ridging there as well. And the models have taken this and started to drop in lower than average heights for a big section of the US. Now, what does this mean? First of all, I don't see it being a problem for the West. I don't see this like shutting things down or splitting the flow of the West and ruining it. Might we see some split flow? Sure. I mean, this is about the time El Nino peaks, and that's common. But what I'm starting to see here is that this may set up a storm track that likes to do this. And if you think back to what I was telling you back in late summer about this winter, I called for a lot of, panhandle hookers. I called for a lot of Arklatex lows. I called for those Paducah lows. I also called those Miller B. And I called for some Miller A. And this might help my forecast verify if we do get something like that. So we need to watch this carefully, because here it is January and it's there again in February. And there's a lot of folks up the East Coast that would look at this and go, finally, could we get a little bit of negative NAO? That's what the ridging up here can do to deliver some systems, because we haven't seen it in a while. So I'm starting to look at this second half of winter. Really, it's the second 2/3 of winter, January, February, and getting some clues here from the models that could be the case. Now, we looked at this yesterday, that the precipitation, seasonal anomalies there, that's December, January, February. So you're getting some hints of that in the forecast. And overall, like I said, the West isn't as though it's shut down. I'm still calling a lot of this into question, this dryness from parts of the Mid-South back into the Southern Plains. But we've got something to watch here. And I want to give you one last thing internationally, and then I'll shut up here finally. There's a tropical cyclone named Jasper going toward northern Queensland here. That's going to be interesting to watch. Some heavy rains in South Australia. Still seeing decent rain, even though the MJO is moving out of this area in Indonesia. I love seeing this moisture coming into South Africa. We talked about the drought there. You're still going through it. I mean, it's wet, and it's very cold in Russia. So this is setting things up across Europe to be quite active for another 10+ days. And down here in Panama, we still have yet to make the flip over to really, really wet conditions. I know it looks wetter north of it, but right over Panama, we're not seeing a whole lot of extra precip. So we've got some international weather just to continue to talk about. I'll work on my new long-range stuff for you tomorrow, and hopefully paint a picture of what's coming forward. So we'll talk then. Thanks.